Despite the awful weather outside, the supermarket was full of customers. Bundled up in raincoats and jackets, they hurried to get inside where they could get warm, away from the biting cold. Everyone who came in passed by the security post, where a young guard sat with a disgruntled look on his face, professionally scanning each customer with a watchful gaze. Larry Patterson had been working as a security guard for a while now, and he knew that it was during times like these that he had to keep his eyes peeled for potential shoplifters. That's why, when the sea of people brought in an inconspicuous old man dressed in patched-up clothes, the guard quickly got up from his chair and blocked the man's path. "Hey man, where do you think you're going?" "This is a store, not a homeless shelter," said Larry, louder than necessary. "I'm sorry, sir. I just need to buy some bread and milk. I'll leave the premises immediately after," the old man hastened to assure the guard. Unfortunately, the job came with a sense of power, which had already gone to Larry's head, and so he wasn't willing to back down from the homeless man. "I already told you. Go beg for money somewhere else. Leave or I will make you leave," said Larry, pointedly looking at the baton hanging on his side. At these words, the old man sighed sadly and stepped back, defeated. The beggar realized that the guard wasn't going to let him shop there, so he decided to try a different store. But the old man had barely made a few steps before a stranger called out to him, deeply outraged by the guard's behavior. "Wait, sir. Let me buy you what you want," offered the stranger, smiling reassuringly at the surprised old man. The old man's mysterious savior was Frank Sanchez. More than anything in the world, he hated social injustice and the mistreatment of vulnerable elderly people. This was partly due to the fact that 6 months earlier, Frank had lost the closest person to him, his mother. The young man would never be able to forget Mrs. Sanchez's face when she found out that she was terminally ill. Frank did everything he could to try to give his mother a chance at beating the disease. Unfortunately, despite the oncologist's optimistic prognoses, Miranda Sanchez passed away 3 days before her 45th birthday. Frank was devastated. He felt that a part of his soul had died together with his mother. The young man grew up without a father, and so his mother was the closest person he had. As a child, Frank often asked his mother about his father and why he didn't live with the family. Trying to smooth over the awkwardness, Mrs. Sanchez told her son that his father had died shortly before the boy was born. Apparently, the woman thought this response would be the easiest for the boy to understand and accept. She saw that her son had been longing for a strong father-son relationship and fatherly support since early in his childhood. Now, looking at the confused old man, Frank felt a tinge of pity, prompting him to show compassion towards the beggar. At the same time, the young man tried to ignore the frustrated guard, who believed that the old beggar had fooled yet another gullible shopper. "I know their type. They're used to living off others instead of working." The guard scoffed and headed back to his post. Meanwhile, Frank walked down the aisles, gathering an abundant amount of food, which he conveniently put into a large bag for the old man. "Thank you very much. I don't even know what to do with all this food. I live in a trailer home with no fridge. It would be a shame to let these expensive things go bad," the old man said guiltily, lowering his eyes. "No thanks necessary. I understand. How about you come home with me? I live alone, so it won't be a problem. You could take a shower and freshen up," Frank suggested, making his way to the exit. Hearing these words, the old man couldn't help but tear up. Charles Green was long out of practice in human interaction and didn't expect to ever come across a person who'd be willing to help him. Therefore, the old man didn't hesitate and quickly accepted Frank's offer, carefully getting into the passenger seat of the beat-up Ford. The old man sat quietly during the entire ride, holding tightly to the bag of groceries, lost in his own thoughts. Only when Frank finally broke the silence did Charles Green exchange a few words with him. Despite living alone after his mother's passing, Frank still kept the house in immaculate condition, which would have made Mrs. Sanchez very happy. On top of that, to honor his mother, the exemplary son kept the house exactly as she had left it. Sometimes, Frank would catch himself thinking about how he almost expected to open the front door and find Mrs. Sanchez standing there as if nothing had happened. miraculously cured of the illness and brought back to her beloved son. "Well, welcome to my humble abode. It's no mansion, but it's livable," said Frank, inviting his guest to come inside. In response, Mr. Green let out an awkward cough and walked through the door, still clinging to the bag of groceries. "By the way, the bathroom is at your disposal. You can also use my razor to shave. I think some shaving cream and hot water would be enough for that stubble," Frank offered, smiling warmly. "Thank you. You've been very kind to me. I feel a bit awkward," Charles Green answered and looked at his reflection in the mirror. The host just waved his hand in the air in response and began setting the table for a simple dinner. The biggest discovery for Frank would come much later though, after the guest had shaven and taken a bath. With the scruff gone from his face, Charles Green appeared much younger. He actually looked nothing like the frail old man everyone thought he was. Now, Frank was looking at a fit, silver-haired man of about 55 years with sad gray eyes and a slightly noticeable, ironic smile. "There you go, that's much better. Now you don't look like a forest hermit anymore," the young man remarked admiringly. Frank was very happy that he could help the man, who had fallen into despair and lost faith in life. To his surprise, Mrs. Green turned out to be very nice to talk to. He gave adequate answers to almost any question. However, as soon as Frank would try to learn something about him, the man would quickly close up and change the subject. The next day, Frank had to go to work, but he invited Mr. Green to stay at his place for as long as he needed. The young man knew full well that his own poverty and low income left little to be stolen, and from what he could see, Charles Green hardly resembled a thief. Thus, when Frank left for work, he was positive that the old man wouldn't cause him any trouble. However, a surprise was awaiting the young man when he came home and discovered Mr. Green standing in the hallway in front of the picture of his late mother. This peculiar picture was taken during her young college years and showed her embracing a handsome young man. What puzzled Frank the most, though, was that the old man was crying. He didn't seem the least bit fazed by his host's presence as he wiped the tears off his wrinkled face. "Mr. Green, what's wrong? Are you okay?" the young man exclaimed worriedly, touching his guest on the shoulder. The old man seemed to have not heard him at all and remained glued to the photo of Mrs. Sanchez. Finally, Mr. Green seemed to have calmed down and turned his face to the host, saying, "I knew your mother, Frank. I probably knew her better than anyone else in the world. See that man standing next to her in the photo? That's me." "What did you just say?" The young man let out a cry. The old man sighed sadly in response, and having gathered up some courage, began his story. Every word seemed to come out with great difficulty at first, but then, having calmed down a bit, the guest started to speak with more ease and confidence. The man explained that he'd met Miranda at a college party many years ago. The young people quickly developed feelings for each other, giving them hope for a strong relationship. Being several years older than his beloved, Charles believed that he knew more about life than the trusting young woman who grew up at the orphanage. Unfortunately, that was the reason why Charles often allowed himself liberties that ultimately caused their relationship to end. Shortly before the fateful fight, the young couple was actually about to get married. They'd even ordered custom wedding rings from a jeweler. By the cruel twist of fate, Miranda and Charles broke up when the orphan woman was already carrying the child of her once beloved man. Of course, Charles Green had no way of knowing that his ex-fiancée was pregnant. Meanwhile, he went on to lead a lavish lifestyle and preferred not to burden himself with moral principles. Time flew by. Days turned into months that turned into years. Only now, so many years down the road, having found himself in the home of his ex-fiancée, did Charles Green realize what an awful mistake he made back then. Having heard his guest's confession, Frank felt that the world as he knew it was falling apart right before his eyes. "Wait, sir. Don't jump to any conclusions. You might be mistaken," Frank said, trying to steady his voice. "No, son, I'm not mistaken, and I have every reason to be sure," Mr. Green answered, reaching for his chest for some reason. A moment later, the old man held out his hand with a shimmering wedding ring in it. He had been carrying it in his breast pocket, right by his heart, all these years. One look was enough for Frank to recognize the ring his mother had kept in a box for so many years and treated as a family heirloom. As a child, he often took the ring out and looked at it. He knew that on the inside, the skilled jeweler had engraved a man's name. As if to confirm Frank's suspicions, the name of his deceased mother was immortalized on Mr. Green's ring. Finally realizing that his birth father was standing right next to him at that very moment, Frank pulled the old man in for a long hug. The young man had been dreaming of this moment for so many years, and now that it was finally happening, he needed some time to process it all. Frank's eyes welled up with tears, which he hadn't experienced since his beloved mother's funeral. Hugging his father, the young man knew that they would never be apart again. Frank understood that despite having made many mistakes in life, Charles Green was still the closest family he had, and that he had already punished himself enough and deserved forgiveness. The young man was also sure that his mother was looking down on them and was happy that the father and son had finally found each other and would always be together from then on.